Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Deep Dive Daily. Okay, so you've probably seen the word gooning popping up everywhere online and thought, what on earth is that? Well, trust me, you are not alone. Today, we're diving deep into this massive new trend to figure out what it actually is, what it does to your brain, and why everyone suddenly seems to be talking about it. So, why are we even talking about this? Well, get this. In the last year alone, searches for the word gooning have shot up by a staggering 800%. Yeah, you heard that right. That isn't just a small trend, that's a full-on explosion of curiosity. So let's get into what is driving all of this attention. All right, first up, let's just cut through all the noise online. What does this term actually mean? Let's find out. Okay, so here is the straight-up definition. Gooning is all about prolonged masturbation, and when I say prolonged, I mean for hours, and sometimes even for days. But here's the surprising part. The goal isn't what you might think. It's all about trying to reach this kind of trance-like state by just staying in that zone of peak arousal. Now, you might be thinking, hold on, isn't that just edging? And that's a really good question, but they're actually very different. See, edging is more of a clinical technique, something used in therapy to help with control. Gooning, on the other hand, is all about maintaining that constant state of arousal, and it's pretty much always linked to consuming a huge amount of pornography. In the community, they even have a name for it, goon fuel. So what's actually happening inside our heads when this is going on? Let's get into the neuroscience of this so-called goon state and see what's firing up in the brain. To really get it, we've got to look at the 4 standard stages of arousal. The key here, the entire point of gooning really, is to intentionally stretch out that second stage, the plateau, for as absolutely long as possible. And this is where it gets really fascinating. fMRI scans actually show that during this prolonged state, a part of the brain called the orbitofrontal cortex is just going wild. It's firing continuously, and that leads to less anxiety, less fear, and even a drop in our ability to think logically. Now, that might sound a little bit intense, but it actually explains the appeal for some people. Those in the gooning community often describe it as a kind of meditative ego death. Basically, a way to completely switch off all those anxious thoughts and just exist in the moment. Okay, but what about the long-term effects of doing this over and over again? Let's take a look at how this can actually start to physically change our brains. You know, one of the biggest long-term risks is something called reward system downregulation. Now, think of it like this. By constantly flooding your brain with this super intense pleasure, you can actually make it harder to enjoy normal, everyday things. And that is a huge deal. And this whole thing kicks off a really powerful feedback loop. The prolonged sessions alter the brain, then the brain starts craving more novelty, which pushes a person to find more and more intense content. And that just reinforces the entire cycle, making it harder and harder to step away. And the impact doesn't stop there. Scientists have found that these kinds of binges can mess with our executive functions, you know, the part of our brain that helps us adult, in ways that look a lot like other behavioral addictions, like gambling. We're talking about more impulsivity, trouble focusing, and real difficulty regulating emotions. So that brings us to the big question. Why now? What is going on in the world that's making this particular trend just take off? Let's zoom out and connect some of the dots. So one of the major factors really seems to be the pandemic. Check this out. On March 11th, 2020, COVID was declared a pandemic. Just 2 weeks later, Pornhub's global traffic was up by 24%. That's a pretty shocking correlation. And yes, studies confirmed that as the world got scarier, porn use went way up. Psychologically, it makes a lot of sense, right? When the world feels totally overwhelming, this kind of activity becomes a form of escapism, a way to avoid difficult or painful emotions. Some researchers have even called it a search for instant artificial happiness. And that kind of escapism is now easier to get than ever before, thanks to what experts are calling the AAA influence. It's accessible. I mean, it's right there on our phones, 24/7. It's affordable. Most of it is totally free. And it's anonymous. No one has to know. That is a seriously powerful combination that has never really existed before in history. So, beyond all the brain science and the big picture trends, what does this actually mean for people's real lives? Let's talk about the human cost. A survey of people who actually do this gives us a really direct look. 16% said they deal with unplanned urges, 8% admit they struggle to stop once they start, and 7% reported a noticeable nosedive in their desire for real-life partners. But maybe the most telling and honestly the saddest finding from that study was about what happens after the binge. That escape is only temporary. It's immediately followed by this huge wave of emotions like shame, loneliness, disgust, guilt, and even a sense of hopelessness. And all of this leaves us with a really important question that we all kind of have to wrestle with. In a world that offers us endless instant gratification, what's the long-term price we're actually willing to pay for our brains, for our happiness, and for our relationships? That's a lot to think about. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this, share it around, and subscribe for more. Drop a comment below with your views. See you tomorrow at the same time.